God morgon och varmt välkomna till Erik Pensers bolagsdag. Vi börjar med presentationen av ett mycket spännande bolag, OssDsign. Presentationen kommer att hållas av bolagets vd, Morten Hennevald, och presentationen hålls på engelska. Please, Morten, do start.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here. As always, when we do these presentations, the normal disclaimer. Just if there's anyone that doesn't know OssDsign, we are an upcoming company in the orthopedic industry. Today we participate in two different segments, what we call CMF or craniomaxillofacial with our cranial implant, and in the orthobiologic space with our nanosynthetic bone graft. Today we operate in about 10 markets globally. The reason we are really here is that we are seeing that the current bone replacement products in the marketplace today just fail to heal a wide range of skeletal defects. If we take the example first of our cranial implant, then unfortunately people have traumatic brain injuries, some will need to have an implant. The big issue we see here is the level of infection rate, which in the literature sits around 10%. We have anecdotal feedback that suggests it may even be a lot higher. Ultimately, these implants, by and large, will need to be removed. When it comes to spine, the indications are a little bit different. We grow older as human beings. We're actually getting older at the moment, and that means that our spine naturally degenerates. Some will have spinal instability and will need to have what we call a fusion surgery, essentially stabilizing the spine, where you use some hardware, screws and rods, and then you apply bone graft to make sure you get good bone ingrowth. What we see today is 1 in 5 patients just do not achieve that outcome. So when you add it all up, you're talking hundreds of thousands of patients every single year that doesn't get the outcome they deserve, have to go through revision. It's very painful, but it's also extremely costly to society. So what do we bring to the market? Today, OssDsign really has 2 franchises and 2 main products. Our OssDsign cranial patient-specific implant. It's our legacy product. This is where the company was started. It has outstanding clinical performance. We have shown in the latest post-market surveillance study, again, an explantation rate of 1.6% because of infection, right? So that has to be seen in the context of the 10% I talked about before. The product today is sold in the US, in Europe, and in Japan. Then with the Sirakoss acquisition late 2020 and the launch in last year, we now also have our new high margin and very scalable nanosynthetic bone graft called OssDsign Catalyst. This is not clinical, it's preclinical, but it comes with outstanding preclinical data, actually comparing to the absolute best drug on the market, not even a bone graft. So this is, of course, what we're using to commercialize the product. So what does that mean for OssDsign? For many years, we were only in cranial. That's a nice business to be in, about 400 million, nicely growing, very decent gross profit. But of course, now with the addition of our bone graft franchise, we are looking at a potential and addressable market that has gone up significantly. It's also a market that's growing nicely, and I think very importantly here, because it is scalable, it also typically sits with a gross margin of 90% or even north of that. Bone graft can be applied essentially from head to toe and is used across the orthopedic industry. We've made a very conscious choice to focus on spinal surgery. Why is that? Well, essentially, as you can see, by far the biggest users of bone graft, the biggest potential is in spine surgery. As it happens, many of us, myself in the board, our US sales force, and other people have a long history in spine and biologics. So it's also a very natural place for us to go. We know who the surgeons are, we know the dynamics, we know hospitals. So this is where we are right now focusing in the US. Last year, we also announced our strategy called Ascend 25. There's absolutely no change to that. As I will show you in a second, it really seems to be working. We want to focus the company serving neuro and orthopedic spinal surgeons. We see ourselves maybe over time playing in 3 segments in the orthopedic industry, and then we set 5 very clear priorities: winning in the US, commercializing our bone graft, and a few other things, in particular also accelerating our clinical agenda. So that we are staying very loyal to. We are living it day in, day out, and we are executing according to plan. So on Tuesday, we also announced our Q3 results. I want to spend a little bit of time there. We came out with an exponential 96% growth and had another record-breaking sales quarter. As in line with our corporate strategy, we also saw continued triple-digit growth in the US, 155% growth in Q2, now followed up by 144% in Q3. And that has to be seen in the light that Q3 of last year was the best quarter ever for us in the US. We also saw an exceptional strong acceleration of our OssDsign Catalyst, actually hitting already 6.6 million sales in the quarter. And it means that already within the first year of launch, that product represents 38% of global sales in the quarter. Then we also had a number of other very exciting announcements actually after the quarter ended. I'll come back to those in a second. I want to spend a little bit of time on the US, right? As I said in the strategy, winning the US is an absolute top priority. What you see here in the bar chart, every bar represents rolling 12-month sales. We started in the US in 2017. And, growth has been decent, growing in line with the rest of the company for many quarters. It took us more or less 5 years to get to 12-month rolling sales. As you can see in the last 12 months, that curve has just completely changed exponentially. And it means we have a completely different momentum in the US. I think it's also worth noting that it took us 5 years to get to the first 12 million. And then in the last year, we've added more than that, actually more than double. So we're extremely happy with the way the US is developing right now. As I said before, it also means that our bone graft is now already representing a very meaningful part of the business. Because our bone graft is also a higher margin product, it of course means that from a contribution point of view, profitability contribution point of view, that will be even higher than the numbers you see here. This has gone very fast, also for us, and we are adjusting according to it. Of course, it's a success, but this is now already, as I said, a very meaningful part of OssDsign. As I also said, I want to spend a little bit of time on some of the announcements we made. After the quarter ended, we announced the first line extension. It's a new size of our OssDsign Catalyst, 1cc, really aimed at smaller procedures, cervical spine, the upper part of the spine, but could also be used in smaller extremities like foot and ankle and other things like that. And why is this important? Well, today we have 10, 5, 2.5 cc's. You really need the one to go to hospitals and say, now I have a complete range. So it's going to help us in the hospital approval processes. It also means that today, when we're getting into hospitals and we typically substitute a competitor, they may have to keep the smaller size for that competitor because we cannot offer that today. So it also means now that as we are winning new accounts, hopefully that also means that we can get the previous supplier completely out and get the full share of business. And then I think very importantly, the smaller size actually allow us to target something called ambulatory surgery centers, ASCs, where a lot of surgeons will be part-time working in some shape or form. And what it simply allows us to do is really get the product in the hands. We know handling of the product is one of the features all the surgeons highlight. So the more people we can get it to try, the better, because then they will take the product and carry it in to their main hospital, which is where the big business is. When you take a new product to market, in particular a medtech product, the very first question you get from all the surgeons is it safe to use? How many have been used and who else is using? Those are the questions you get every single time. So we came out only last week with our first post-market safety report covering 511 units with an exceptional 0% device-related complication rate. So we had 4 complaints registered, none of which were deemed device-related in any way, and no adverse incidents either. So this is an outcome that very strongly supports the product safety profile. It will be reassuring for those surgeons that are already using the product, and it will really be meaningful to all the surgeons we are talking to who are considering using the product in the future. During the quarter, we also had another, I would say there's no news to this, it's another addition to the growing body of strong literature on our cranial PSI. The largest single-center case study in the US, 18 patients, 0% again, implant-related complications, good to excellent cosmetic outcome in all. So very much in line with what we have seen. And that's also why when we're looking at cranial PSI, it's really around our post-market surveillance. The updated report will come out before Christmas. But also we are trying to set up a prospective registry in the US. We know that the more publications we get, you will see outcome like I just showed you before. The more publications for us, the better for us. For OssDsign, Catalyst is really around top fusion, and it's really around our prospective registry Propel. For top fusion, we have all patients in, and also very importantly, we have 100% follow-up compliance. So every single patient have come back for the follow-ups as per the protocol. For Propel, this has gone extremely fast. We have witnessed an exceptional interest in working with us in generating clinical data on the product, and it meant actually that we set quite an ambitious target of getting 100 patients in the first year, and we already met that ahead of time a few weeks ago. So extremely proud. The sooner we can get patients in, the sooner we can generate data and help commercialization in the US. During the year, we've also announced a number of milestones. We did that in the first half. We've also done it in the second half. Second half, both some soft and some more hard. But it's extremely pleasing to see that actually when you look back, even though the year hasn't finished yet, we have delivered on everything we said we would achieve. So, of course, that's always a good sign. It's a good sign for me looking at the organization saying we actually say what we're going to do, but we also do what we say. So, very quickly summary, I hope I've showed you today at least that there is a very acute unmet clinical need that we are addressing. We are bringing some very differentiated products and technologies to market with either strong clinical or strong preclinical data. The markets we play in are attractive. They are growing in volume, they are growing in value, they are highly profitable. And last but not least, we seem to have really turned the corner now in the history of OssDsign with a much stronger product offering, greater scalability, and therefore we think and we believe that we can continue on a strong growth trajectory in the future. So that was everything for me. Now back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Morten. A very, very interesting presentation. And you just recently released your third quarter report, and you're doing stunning in performance now, especially in the US. And there I would like to start. I think it's important for investors who are not accustomed to invest in healthcare to understand why are the dynamics and the size of the US market so much different than the rest of the world. Please outline a bit, and why is that so favorable for OssDsign?
Maybe I also just need to explain. So in the orthopedic industry, the US market alone represents about 60 to 65% of the world. And therefore, a success for an orthopedic company is a little bit one-to-one with success in the US. The US is interesting because it's big. It has big volumes. It also has increasing volumes. And then very importantly, the ASP, so the prices you get for your products in the US, tends to be at least twice as high as you're getting in Europe. So that, of course, helps your top line, but it certainly also helps the profitability and the cash flow in the company when you're successful in the US.
And you just recently, with Catalyst, started. What would you say? I mean, it's very early days yet, so there's plenty of opportunity in the marketplace. If we look in the States, so far, how much of the potential have you touched upon so far?
I mean, we've barely scratched the surface, to be honest, right? It's overall the orthobiologics market in the US is worth $1.8 billion, and we just reported 6.6 million SEK in the quarter, right? So there is an enormous potential. Right now, we're also very East Coast focused. That's where our headquarters is. That's where many of our salespeople have their previous experience, and that's really our stronghold. So I would say we haven't even scratched the surface yet. There's a big opportunity in the US that we haven't even considered yet.
That's great. Turning now towards, you're broadening your product offering, and to me it's a bit thrilling to move into the cervical arena. Could you just give the investors a sense? I mean, that's quite a large marketplace in itself. Could you elaborate a bit on cervical spine fusion operations?
I mean, cervical spine is a very decent, a little bit depending, I would say anywhere from 8 to 10% of the spine market. Having said that, I would say the big bulk of where the business is, where if you're successful in spine, it's in the lower back, because that is where the vast majority of procedures will take place. It is also where you typically will use anywhere from 10 to 20 cc's. So 1 to 2 syringes products from us to cover that case. So there's simply more. There are more of those surgeries, and they're more valuable to us. They simply represent a bigger sales opportunity. But of course, cervical is very important, and neurosurgeons and spinal surgeons in the US, they do cover full spine, so they will do anything from cervical to lower back. And that's also mean that you need to provide them with the products that can actually cover all their cases. And that's why the 1cc may not become the biggest revenue contributor in the company, but it's a strategic, very important product to have.
We are saying now in a lot of companies, we're moving into the post-pandemic era, and you know well, but the marketplace is not normal yet. Elaborate a bit. I mean, we're hearing from other orthopedic companies there are problems in the US with staff shortages and so forth. What do OssDsign see in the US marketplace currently ongoing?
We see exactly the same. It seems to be a very flawed perception that because COVID is no longer interfering with our daily business as such, that is not there. The post-pandemic impact is even higher. We see the elective surgery index in the US is actually at the same level as it was in October during the pandemic last year. So we see it very much as with anyone else. I think we are navigating it extremely well. And I would say, I think we're seeing a little bit more robustness on the bone graft side because it's used in spine surgeries, and there is a bigger proportion of spine surgeries that take place privately or in clinics, community clinics, where they have other ways of dealing with staff shortages and can actually play with salary and so on. I think we're seeing a much bigger impact still on cranial business. It's still taking place, but mostly in the level 1 or 2 trauma centers, and we know they just really need a lot more OR nurses, anesthesiologists, and things like that. And that means that they're not operating on the capacity they have.
But that also means that we're starting to build quite a substantial backlog of patients there waiting for operations simply due to these problems in the marketplace right now. What do the orthopedicians tell you? When?
Well, we are hearing now, and this is kind of across different markets in Europe and also some in the US. They think there is a backlog of anywhere from 1 to 2 years of volume. They are also telling us that this is going to take years to work off, in particular because you right now are missing 12% critical staff or so. So they think we're looking at 2 or 3 or maybe even longer to work off that backlog. But yes, there is an enormous amount of patients that haven't been treated and are still waiting to get treated.
You, as all life science companies, and I think you're supporting Catalyst very well scientifically with the top fusion study and the proper registry. Give the investors a bit more flair. What do you expect from these studies and the registry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us, first and foremost, there has been a tradition in bone graft that there are actually many companies out there that haven't focused very much on clinical data. So we also see that as a differentiation for us to try to take the clinical route and really make sure that we put our money where our mouth is. So we have two. We have our top fusion. That's not going to be a big statistical. It's 17 patients for 15 evaluable. It's a first in man. What it will give us is very high level of granularity on every single patient throughout that journey up to 24 months, with images, case reports. All this, of course, we have to wait until we get to the 1 year time point relative to fusion rate. But it is something that we are already sharing with surgeons under NDA as part of our commercialization in the US. I was in the US last month, and we are actually showing the first real patient images on our booth as well. Propel gives us access to lots of clinical data very, very fast. It's not a level 1 data, clinical ID trial, anything of that nature, but it's a very, very broad set of data points we get on every patient, and we get them fast, which means that we get to 1 year very, very fast. And once we do that, or maybe even a little bit earlier, and we own the database, so we can start to look into white papers and all kind of other publications, so we can simply use it to come out and improve the positioning of the product by keep adding more and more clinical data behind it.
For obvious reasons, we've spent a lot of time on the US marketplace, but you're doing quite well also in other geographical markets. Touch base a bit on what's occurring in Europe and how the dynamics are there right now.
Yeah, I mean, Germany is our biggest market. I think we saw some changes during the pandemic. UK was previously one of the big focus areas. We didn't see UK not dealing with the COVID and the post-pandemic impact. And the outlook for the NHS system is not pretty. So we actually decided last year to reorganize a European sales force. At the same time, we saw that in the UK, we saw tremendous potential in France. We won a very large, the most prestigious contract in the Paris area on cranial PSI. So we just saw a much bigger opportunity. So we've actually been taking people out of UK and putting them into France, and that was just completed a couple of months ago. So we are seeing big potential. I think France, for us, from an incremental growth point of view, will probably be the biggest driver in Europe, but Germany is still our biggest market.
Just my final question. Japan is an interesting market, and you're moving in there. Just a brief update on Japan.
Yeah, I mean, we finally managed to launch earlier in the year. As you know, it was scheduled a long time ago, but we couldn't because of the pandemic. Listen, Japan is a notoriously slow market to enter. It's extremely hierarchical, very much KOL-driven. That's going to take time. So from a revenue point of view, I wouldn't expect too much in the short to medium term. Strategically, though, it's extremely important to be in Japan. It is something that's very meaningful when we speak to surgeons actually in Europe and in the US that we are present in Japan. So it's going to take a little bit of time to really be a stronger revenue contributor to the company. But strategically, it's extremely important to have that approval.
Well, thank you very much, Morten. A very interesting presentation. Once again, thank you.
Thank you very much.